In today's video, we have a very exciting one for you guys as we just continue to deep dive into the upcoming very severe cold air, which is becoming more and more confident, and not only that, actually more severe as every single day goes by. That modeling is coming out and just showing much more drastic changes. We even have a massive blizzard popping up on today's European model run, which would bring feet of snowfall to the southeast, mid-Atlantic, all the way up to the northeast. Absolutely crazy nor'easter blizzard on that model, alongside numerous snow threats outside of that storm as well. And then even our GFS model also has multiple threats of snowfall. So regardless, both major models showing severe cold air, and really something we haven't seen in years, some of the coldest air since the winters of 2013 to 2014 and beyond. And some of the snowiest suggestions that we've seen in also many years. So let's dive into things. We're looking at the 30-day temperatures, the past 30 days. This is the final day of November and then the last 29 days of December. And what we see is very cold air along the eastern seaboard. This is likely the look that we're going to end off December on, just really warm throughout the south central and then a majority of the west here. So a positive PNA look. And then again, that east coast area being cold. January looks much colder and, in fact, severely colder. And December already has basically gone down as our coldest winter month along the East Coast that we've had in about 3, 4, 5 years, depending on where you're at. So if January is even colder, it's going to quickly take that title away from this December, which was really decent in its own regard. Let's take a look at the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center forecast for the 6 to 10 day period here, which will be January 4th through 8th. They just updated this today. And really, we had this deep blue already up in this area, but they've gone ahead and extended it all the way up through the northern plains and upper Midwest. We can tell that this positive PNA is expected to be in full effect here, which really redirects that cold from Canada straight into the eastern states. Everything is going to look very similar on our next frame, which will be the 8 to 14 day outlook, except we're going to see this positive PNA trend northward, and we're going to see this cold air trend southward. So watch this. Everything's going to get a little bit more dramatic as we move to the next period of time. And look at that. We see that the warmer temperatures have pushed further up the west coast, and these colder temperatures have pushed further south down the east coast. Typically, it starts with that western part and then moves into that eastern part as an effect. Even looking at Canada here on the bottom left corner of your screen, or Alaska better yet, we see that these warm temperatures have reached the southern shores of Alaska as well, which just shows you how insane that positive PNA really is. And this is by far the coldest look I have seen put out by the Climate Prediction Center in, like I said, probably my entire YouTube career, which is like 5 or 6 years now. So this is not your typical cool down. In fact, areas that have highs averaging in the 50s, lows averaging maybe in the 30s, you might stay below freezing for days here. This is going to be very severe. We're going to see single digits and temperatures sub-zero in areas that really aren't used to that in more of the middle portion of the eastern states. So very cold stuff on the way. We'll, of course, deep dive into the temperatures in a little bit. As far as the models are concerned, here is your 3 to 4 week outlook, which is for the 11th through the 4th or the 24th, better yet. And this shows a lot of the same in that longer range period. We see the warmer temperatures really trending in for the west and the southeast especially, but really the entire eastern states being below normal, as you can see. Really interesting. And again, Alaska being warmer shows you how far up the west coast that warm air is really spreading. And I've taught you guys this before, but the further this warmth travels up the west coast, which again, it goes all the way to Alaska here, the deeper south this cold gets pushed. And that's why we're seeing, drastically cold temperatures in the deep south, like the Gulf states, even Florida, northern Florida, seeing some of that very cold air. I mean, even comparatively to normal, we're seeing areas in South Florida very cool. As we take a look first off at our European model, what we see is that for the day today, we're seeing showers, thunderstorms. I'm making this video a little bit ahead of schedule, but we do see that there will be a pretty significant low for this afternoon across Indiana and Ohio. Warm front out ahead of things, cold front underneath. And this is what's bringing a lot of our tornadic activity and severe weather More of that on the way for the southeast corridor throughout the day and evening today. And what we see is a lot of snowfall and storminess happening in the northwest as well. Really, this is a little bit of a sneak peek into a transition into the pattern we're going to be in. We see some warmth pushing up the west and some cold pushing down the east, but really nothing like what we're going to be seeing. This is just the very beginning signs of that change. As we take a look at the 30th, though, we actually are going to see things get kind of warmer in the east before they get cooler. As this cold air pushes southward in the west, we're kind of seeing a flatter jet stream here across the middle of the nation. Some snowfall here for the Rockies, northern plains. Some showers, heavier showers for the northeast here with some milder temperatures, but really nothing too crazy going on. Tuesday the 31st, this is going to be New Year's Eve. We do see another pretty substantial low there over Ohio, bringing mostly rainfall here. A little bit of snowfall maybe for the upper Midwest. And this does have plenty of cold air behind it, as this is going to bring one of our first cold fronts of many that we're going to be seeing here very soon. We do have a building positive PNA by New Year's Eve where some warmer air is pushing northward here along the west, and that's only going to get more dramatic. Again, this is going to be traveling well up the west coast at a certain point here on this model run. We'll have to just wait to see that happen. Wednesday afternoon is going to be New Year's Day, and this is going to be one of our first snow events here in the east. Now what's gone ahead and happened is this warmth has continued to push up the west coast. This has immediately and very effectively caused this cold air to just pour into the eastern states. So many times people tell me in the comments, you focus on the PNA too much. Why do you talk about the PNA? And the reason I talk about it so much is because it is a really, really good tool to use to know what's going to happen in the east. This warmth is surging northward out west, and immediately we see cold air just free-flowing straight into the eastern states. Some years the PNA means a little less. Some years it means more. This is one of those years where it really is almost the driving seat factor here in our patterns, is what it feels like. Again, because of this cold air, we do have some snowfall, especially in the high elevations in here, as this is not the very severe cold air yet. Although, in most winters, this would be severely cold air, but with what we expect in January, this is going to be somewhat marginal in comparison. You'll see in a minute what I'm talking about, but we see by Thursday the 2nd, we still have colder air in the east. Again, I always tell you guys, look for the dips, and we see this is descending towards the east, all of these lines. So this means colder air is located here in the east. We see also the bulging here out west. This is going to be signs of warming in the west, but it's not that dramatic yet. We do see lake effect snowfall getting going. It is pretty darn cold. Again, probably in terms of 10, 15, 20 degrees below normal. Still about half as cold as we expect things to get here just a few days later. The 3rd is going to be a lot of the same. We do see some storms moving in for the northwest, but just kind of plain old cold in the east. Some snow showers around, but nothing major by the 3rd, and really even the 4th. I would say it's very similar as well, but the only thing is we have an eastern Colorado low, some snowfall happening here across the northern and central Rockies, as well as the northern plains, and this is all going to be on the move eastward. So let's see what this kind of has in store for us as we move towards the 5th of December, or January better yet. 998 here over southeastern Missouri. This low is interesting. We get a cold front underneath. We get a cold front or a warm front here to the north. And what this is doing is it is actually pulling up some warmer air for the east. This is going to be one of the only periods where we see near average temperatures in the east. It's pulling up some warmth up the east coast for the 5th into a little bit of the 6th before we get much, much colder. Severe weather could be another factor once again. Maybe another tornado outbreak with a storm like this. Just the setup in mind. I mean, we have a lot of humidity and moisture here. Warmth as well, with tons of cold, dry air moving in by the side. Definitely not a good setup. But we do see heavy snowfall for the upper Midwest and portions of the plains. This could be a pretty hefty snowstorm for them. As we keep going, we see this isn't just moving straight north along the jet stream. It's actually pulling eastward quite a bit. I want to move us even further in. We see the Great Lakes and Northeast get plenty of snowfall as this low is almost bombing out from upper 990s. And in 24 hours, it's basically down into the lower 980s. So we are seeing a huge drop. Again, I think to be officially termed bombing out as a low, it would need to be 24 millibars in 24 hours. I don't think we quite reached that, but it is drastically falling in pressure here. As we keep going towards the afternoon, what we see is that this is sticking around a 983. There's some broad low pressure here across the northeast. We see snowfall around for the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, northeast here, and much, much colder air moving into the east by this point. This is when the severe cold gets started. We have some rainfall along the east coast, and likely this is going to be one of those cold fronts where you see a 10, 20, 30 degree temperature drop in a very short period of time because of how severe this Arctic air is behind that cold front. As we get going towards that evening, that low drops even further down into the 970s, bringing some New England snowfall over time. And again, just like we looked at yesterday, your polar vortex is somewhere in here, this polar vortex event, and it's just going to keep dropping in over time, especially as we approach the 10th here. So let's keep watching this. We see it drop in and bring really, really severe cold air, especially in the central states in the northeast here by this 9th time frame. This is one of our first snowfall setups, and this is really the major blizzard. We are seeing snowfall deep into Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Arkansas. This would be a historic snowfall event for these very far southern areas. Even lake effect, or not lake effect, freezing rain. You can tell I'm tired with all the festivities we've been having lately, but Texas, Louisiana coast into, coastal Alabama, coastal Mississippi, seeing a freezing rain event would be catastrophic, I could imagine. And this is going to become a blizzard as it moves eastward. So the low is 1,004 right there, 1,002 moving through areas like Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, down to a 997 off the Carolina coast, bringing heavy, heavy snowfall to this corridor here. Really, really heavy. And again, it's going to be on the move even further northward. It's a 997. This is a classic Miller A nor'easter originating in the Gulf of Mexico, moving off the southeast coast, and then really just continuing straight up the coast here. That's what we call a Miller A nor'easter. Miller B, if you're curious, would be something that moves off the middle of the east coast and then moves north from that point. This would be Miller B in that instance. So you might hear me refer to this throughout the winter. Keep that in mind. Miller B moves off the east coast halfway up. Miller A is moving from the Gulf straight up the entirety of the east coast. Let's keep going towards Thursday evening. This will be about 7 p.m. and we have heavy snowfall now arriving in New England. Some of the southeast, mid-Atlantic, from basically Georgia and South Carolina all the way northward through everywhere in between up into New England. Heavy, heavy snowfall. This low is now a 984 millibar low pressure center. Very severe. And this would likely be one of the bigger East Coast snowstorms of the 2020s. I'm not considering, what's happened so far in the 2020s, but I'm saying no matter what happens over the next 5 years, this is basically going to go down as like a once every decade type storm. And we see it still snowing by Friday morning at 7 a.m. in New England, with very severe cold air moving in afterwards, eventually coming to an end. And that's not it, really. We get another type of snow system trying to develop. We get a low very close to Florida here. Maybe another Miller A that would want to get going, but it's just too much cold air. It's suppressed way too far to the south. And we even saw a GFS model run last night where it brought snowfall to northern Florida and southern Georgia with this low. It was just a tad bit colder with that low right there, and it brought heavy snowfall to northern Florida and southern Georgia. I'm not telling you that that's what's going to happen, although a model showed it. This is just a model breakdown after all, but what I'm telling you is that this cold is that severe. I think that's the biggest takeaway here, is that this is highly unusual cold air is the biggest factor. I think no matter what kind of snowfall we get during this event, the cold air is going to be the biggest story. And that's actually the end of the model run here. So I want to take you into the GFS model run, which we do have the 12Z out. We do see this low moves through the upper Midwest. We kind of move through the next couple days. Again, we get this low around Wednesday the 1st, where we get some elevation snowfall mostly in here, but nothing too crazy yet. The cold is moving in between the 1st and 2nd for most areas along the East Coast, so it's not fully arrived by that point. Here's as we move towards the 2nd afternoon. Again, the 2nd through the 4th is going to be a little quieter, just kind of plain cold in here. Here's by the 4th afternoon, and once again, just like the European model, except we're a little further south with this low here. The Euro was much more where this little L is in eastern Colorado. We're more over New Mexico with this. Shouldn't cause too many drastic differences, but the GFS does tend to place things a little further south, oftentimes too far south. We see this low start to move through Arkansas, Missouri, bringing some snowfall to Virginia, North Carolina, some freezing rain in those areas as well, before it cuts through, bringing some warmer air underneath it. Again, keyword here is warmer, not warm necessarily, because it's going to be near normal. We do see snowfall really a factor here for the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and New England, as well as New York as well. That one could be a pretty big snowmaker. And then we get going with a storm that is similar to what we saw in the European model in some regards. Some broad low pressure going on in here, some snowfall for Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, even Arkansas, Texas. But again, you can tell this is a little bit less amped. We don't have quite as much moisture or snowfall for that matter happening with this storm, especially in the deeper south. And as we keep going, we see that this is a much further suppressed storm. Our low is forming way offshore. And we end up with something of a South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia snowstorm, and it doesn't manage to get pulled up the coast. It's actually going to move along this jet stream kind of straight offshore. Typically, I mentioned this yesterday, I think, because we had some similar looks. If the GFS is showing snowfall here, in my experience, that would mean that it's going to set up somewhere a tick further north if we see it verify. And that includes my neck of the woods. So that's why I've really memorized this. You really want it to show something like this if it's going to end up being like this. I hope that makes sense. That's how that southeast bias tends to work. Sometimes it ends up being correct with the southern snowfall, but typically you're watching for a trend to the north. We do see a low forming here by the 10th. Again, polar vortex right here. Deep Arctic air in all the surrounding areas. I mean, we're snowing in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi here. Clearly very cold. And we're getting another nor'easter trying to form here. Although this one just kind of lengthens out with the broad low pressure. So there's low pressure throughout this kind of area here. And we do get a little bit of, again, coastal North Carolina snowfall. And that's about it. But remember, trends north typically. Then that really brutal air moves in, 10th, 11th, 12th. It's going to be a little harder to come by snowfall during this just because there's so much cold air that your jet stream is here. If any storms are going to track through, they're not going to be over here, They're not going to be here. A low is going to track along that jet stream. So it's going to be much harder to come by snow, especially in your more traditional areas that see snowfall. It might actually be a little easier to come by in the deeper south regions or perhaps back here over some of the plains. So keep that in mind. But we keep that brutal cold air through the end of the model run on the 14th. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Here is your total snowfall. We're not ready for that yet. Here's your total precipitation. And as you can see, we have tons expected here for the East Coast as these storms track northward through these areas here. As we get some inland storms, we get some coastal storms. That's obviously going to be a hot spot. We also see that the Northwest, they're going to be slowing down at some point during this, but we do get a decent amount in here, especially towards the beginning of that model run. Now, your precipitation anomaly is going to look like this. We have some above average, some below average in this Northwest area, but really mostly above. And then we see that for the East and some of the Ohio Valley here, above average with these storms that move through these areas. Definitely going to aid in bringing precipitation overall. Now, here is your strikingly intense snowfall outlook from the European model. Really decent amounts for the mountainous west. Really decent amounts here for the northern plains, upper Midwest. Great Lakes doing really well. A lot more lake effect snowfall on the way, which we've already seen a ton, which is crazy. And then, obviously, let's address the elephant in the room. These areas would do tremendous. There's still a lot of time to go. Again, we could have some trends to the south, believe it or not. That would be a little crazy to even think about, but the GFS model is further south. We can see trends to the north. We can see trends to the east on a lot of this. So imagine with me if the snow is further east, or perhaps further west with the snowfall could also occur. So you can imagine that there could be some shaking up of this. Also intensity. This is a very intense storm. It would be a lot harder for this storm to get any stronger than this, but it would be easy for a storm to maybe be a lot less intense than this. We'll be watching, obviously, for all of these trends. I want to zoom you in. We're going to start out with let's see if we can get the full effect here. Now, we'll start with the south central view. Let's see if we get something here of kind of... There we go. Okay, so first off, Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas here, getting multiple inches of snowfall. Very, very intense for these areas. Even Louisiana getting, a lot here. Again, this is very high end in my opinion. It's going to be it's going to be hard for this to happen or anything more intense than this. This is just a model run, so this isn't like my maps that I've drawn or my forecast, but I would say if there's any time in the world for something like this to happen, it would be during this historically cold air. So keep that in mind. I'm going to urge you to take it with a grain of salt, although we're going to be watching because I think highly unusual things are going to be a lot more likely during this phase of historically cold air. I think that should be obvious. So, not saying it's going to happen, but I would say possibilities are higher than they typically would be. And then we get into the real plowable stuff, which is going to be mostly this corridor from Louisiana up through Mississippi, Alabama, northern Georgia, northern South Carolina, northern North Carolina, and basically everywhere up the East Coast from there. This is the area that I drew here is everywhere that's seeing 6 inches plus for the most part. Mostly seeing a foot or more in here, at least 10 inches. And then the main area of 2 or more feet is going to be this inner circle that I've just drawn in here, where most of these areas are seeing 2 feet or more. Now, this would be historic, obviously. So we're going to keep this in mind. Consider that the amounts might be quite a bit lower. A track like this isn't the most far-fetched in the world, though. Again, the track, not mounts, but tracks, because of that cold air, like I mentioned. I could even see along the East Coast, this could be even a little too far north. I think that for areas in here where it's a little bit more rare for snowfall, this might be your time to shine in the deeper southeast, as, again, very cold air is here. The GFS model kind of encapsulates this perfectly. Again, areas in the north still do very, very well. They don't get this blizzard along the New England coast on the GFS model, but for areas in the deeper southeast, I think this could be something a little bit more realistic. You know what I mean? 1 to 3 inches in these areas, but a lot of these, like in here, it's very, very rare. I mean, if these areas saw 2 to 4 inches, that'd be probably the most they've seen in 5-10 years for a lot of these folks. But again, when the snowfall sets up in here on this GFS model, I usually consider that it could be somewhere in here. That's definitely something to watch for. And I think that I want to say that if we move to the Canadian model, yeah, I think the Canadian model shows something just like that. I usually don't show the gem model, but here it is. And I can recall being a weather kid here, you know, not making YouTube videos, but cheering for snowfall, obviously in my area, where the Canadian model would look like this, and then the GFS model would be way to the south. I was a kid back then. I didn't have money to pay for a website that had the European model, so I used the Canadian and the GFS model. Some of you might be able to relate, but that was me, you know, 10 years ago or something like that. And a lot of times it looked like this, the GFS or the Canadian model showing something like this that was bullseyeing me, like, yay, you know, 2, 5, 10 inches. I was excited for anything, obviously. But the GFS model would be way suppressed to the south. But what we would see is, as the days drew closer, that GFS model would just kind of tick, tick, tick northward and kind of just place right into place. Sometimes it would even go too far. It'd be north of me. I'd be like, dang it. So things can change. That's the types of progressive changes that we see, and that's why we upload every single day, so we can keep track of these things. Let's take a look here at the European extended model. This is going to be, again, mostly just to show you that even this European extended ensemble has a lot of models showing snowfall in here in these unusual areas. This is for the 46-day outlook. Amounts don't matter that much, like I mentioned. Let's take a look at the zoomed in look. And this model is showing a lot of members bringing this deeper south snowfall. So this tells me that they have the very cold air, and they are having a lot of members bring snowfall to these deeper south areas, which ensembles are great because you have like 20 members and you're taking the average of all of those. So if you're taking 50 opinions and the majority of them show snowfall in some of these areas, that bodes really well, and a lot better than a single computer model run showing something, because, you know, that can tend to be pretty wacky. But oftentimes when you get an ensemble outlook, you have a lot more to work with and a lot more confidence in it. Let's take a look at the European model's temperature outlook. Again, quite warm for a couple of days here. 31st, going to be quite warm along the east. It's kind of funny. We're going to be very warm here. The dark reds are going to be about 10 to 15 degrees above normal. And then just kind of overnight, New Year's Day, we're near normal for a lot of these areas, if not below normal. So that's a 10 to 15 degree drop. And then between the 1st and the 2nd, a lot of us move down into the, 10, 15 degrees below normal. So another 10 to 15 degree drop. So expect a gradual drop between the 31st, the 1st, and the 2nd. This isn't when the severe cold is here at all. 3rd, more cold on the way. 4th, it's here. Again, 10 to 15 degrees below normal, pretty marginal in comparison. Here comes the big one, though. Sunday the 5th, here's that brief warm-up out ahead of it. Again, by this frame, we have something like this, a low in between, warm front up above, cold front down below. So we get a brief kind of push of warm air up the East Coast here, with this cold air really knocking on the door. So expect about 18 to 24 hours of kind of milder temperatures before this much more severe cold air moves in. Here's the look for Tuesday the 7th. Very, very cold. Again, greens are 10 to 15 degrees below normal. These purplish blues in here is what I call them. They're 15 to 25 degrees below normal. And then the magentas are 25 degrees or more below normal. So a huge departure from what's typical. Wednesday afternoon the 8th, it's moving eastward. Here's Thursday the 9th, almost at the East Coast. Friday the 10th, it's around the southeast primarily. And then for the 11th, we've kind of lost some of the severity, which tends to happen. The 12th as well there, and we don't really get much further. Here's the actual temperatures. I just want to show you what this could look like as things move in. So here we go. Is the second high temperatures kind of in the low 40s, upper 30s, or something around there for most people. Some of these areas are already in the 20s. The lows, much more below freezing, all the way down. You know, we're close to freezing for South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee. So these further south areas were already pretty well below freezing as lows. Here's that brief warm-up. We see that move up the coast here around the 5th, 6th. Then here comes the truly severe stuff. Lows in the mid to low 20s. We see below freezing in northern Florida, southern Louisiana. Traditional areas that are very hard to get below freezing are below freezing here around the 7th. Here comes the 8th high, below freezing for a lot of these areas. That low, well into the teens. Below zero, look at this. Sub-zero temperatures everywhere in the green. We see a swath of this through Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, northern South Carolina, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia. This is very severe. This is historically cold for many of these areas. Again, below 0 Fahrenheit. I mean, that is severe. Your highs in the teens or lower 20s in a lot of these areas. I mean, my neck of the woods in the mid-teens. I've never felt it that cold as a high, ever, as long as I've lived here. Saturday, mid-20s. The lows in the single digits again for these East Coast areas. And really, I mean, for most of these areas, your freezing line is somewhere between the red and the blue right in there. A lot of these areas are staying below freezing for like 3, 4, 5 days straight, which is crazy for some of these more mid areas in the eastern states. Unheard of. As you take a look at the GFS, I mean, we're going to see a lot of the same warmth, gradual cold air here for the early January timeframe, brief warm-up up the East Coast, and then that more severe cold air moves in. And we get perfect agreement on this GFS model from that European model. And again, straight through the 14th, no end in sight for this cold air here in the east. As we take a look at the European extended model's temperature outlook in 7-day increments, here is the 29th of December through the 5th of January. A bit warmer in these areas, not due to the like 2nd through 5th, but more so between the 29th and the 1st and 2nd is the reason for this. Immediately, once we move, just I'm going to take it day by day. So this is the 30th and beyond, 31st and beyond. And then here's the 1st through the 8th of January. And you can see that this period looks very, very cold here. This looks very similar to that 6 to 10 day outlook by the National Weather Service. Positive P&A here. I fully agree with their outlook. I think it's perfect. Let's take a look at the 8th through the 15th, and this is when that severe cold air is really centered over these areas in the east here, so very far below normal for this 7-day period. And then let's take a look at the 15th through the 22nd, where we've lost some of the severity, but still looks like a rather cold period here. GFS extended model here. Again, this is the 28th through the 4th. Let's take a look at the 1st through the 8th. Looks very similar. And then the 8th through the 14th, or 15th, better yet, looks very severe. Once again, just like the European extended model. Then here's that 15th through the 22nd, where we lose some steam, but certainly still below normal. Last but not least, one more long-range model, our CFS daily model. And this is going to be for the 30th through the 6th here. As we just continue on for the 1st through the 8th, looking colder. Here is the 8th through the 15th. This model is the coldest of the long-range bunch that we're looking at today. Very severe. This is a 7-day period where we're expecting 15 to 25 degrees below normal in this corridor. That is crazy for a 7-day period. As we keep going for the 15th through the 22nd, this model says no, it's going to get worse. We see some of those magenta areas 25 to 35 degrees below normal in a 7-day period. Take this with a grain of salt, but this is some model guidance suggesting that this isn't just going to be the first 3 weeks of January. This is going to be beyond that point as well. Crazy, crazy stuff. Here is even the 22nd through the 29th of January, straight through the end almost of January, and we still have severely below normal temperatures there. Then here is the 29th through the 5th of February, and we actually get cold temperatures still. I'll take you all the way from the 5th through the 12th of February, and this model doesn't even end it by then. If this verified, which please take it with a grain of salt, because this one goes very far, very hard to predict that far out, but just putting this out there, if something like this verified, this would be probably a top 3 coldest winter, if not maybe the coldest winter since 2000. If this verified, that would put us in some very, very high echelon categories for this winter, so keep that in mind. With all that being said, please take everything with a grain of salt that we talk about. We're highly confident in severe cold moving in for the first half of January, especially towards the middle point. Any snowstorms that we discussed today are definitely not high confidence yet, any specific storms, although with the amount of cold air that we have and the kind of active storm track, we do expect 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 snowstorms to connect, but we're not confident in any individual one or any individual location yet. So that's the details, the finer details that we're working out right now. Be sure to subscribe. This is an exciting time, by the way, to subscribe to the channel, as we're going to have daily videos coming out talking about all of these things, and we're going to uncover it together. I cannot wait. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.